Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Monster Monday. I am your horrible host, Graham Nolan, and today we're going to be talking about the influx of monster comics in the 1970s, particularly from Marvel Comics. Why then? And how did it come about? Well, to start off, we have to go back to the 1950s. We've got to go back 20 years prior. Certainly, there were monster comics and horror comics. EC Comics produced some wonderful stuff in the 1950s. Stuff like this with undead creatures, zombies, werewolves, all kinds of really, really terrific stuff. But then there came Frederick Wortham, a psychiatrist who somehow was able to link childhood delinquency with comics, different perversions. It was melting kids' minds. All this ridiculous crap that they still try to lump comics and video games into behavioral issues. But it stuck, unfortunately. In the 1950s, people believed it, and comic books were in a tough period. So the publishers, in an effort not to have their livelihoods stamped out, created something called the Comics Code. And this Comics Code was to put restrictions on what could and could not be put into comics at that time. So we're going to go over a few of these things to understand why it took so long for Marvel to do the kind of comics that we're going to be talking about. So these are some of the restrictions from 1954 for the Comics Code Authority. Crimes shall not be presented in such a way as to create sympathy for the criminal, to promote distrust for the forces of law and justice, or to inspire others with a desire to imitate criminals. Okay? If crime is depicted, it shall be as a sordid and unpleasant activity. Policemen, judges, government officials, and respected institutions shall never be presented in such a way as to create disrespect for established authority. Criminals shall not be presented so as to be rendered glamorous or to occupy position which creates, blah, blah, blah. That doesn't really come into play with the monster stuff. Scenes of excessive violence shall be prohibited. Scenes of brutal torture, excessive and unnecessary knife and gunplay, physical agony, the gory and gruesome crime shall be eliminated. No comic magazine shall use the words horror or terror in its title. Okay, that's big right there. All scenes of horror, excessive bloodshed, gory or gruesome crimes, depravity, lust, sadism, masochism shall not be permitted. All lurid, unsavory, gruesome illustrations shall be eliminated. Now, this is all subjective. Who's to say what is lurid or gruesome, particularly at this period, So they're creating white bread horror comics by this point, the stuff that people who like horror don't want to read. Inclusion of stories dealing with evil shall be used or shall be published only where the intent is to illustrate moral issue, and in no case shall evil be presented alluringly, nor so as to injure the sensibilities of the reader. Injure the sensibilities of the reader. And here we go. This is big too. Scenes dealing with or instruments associated with The Walking Dead, torture, vampires and vampirism, ghouls, cannibalism, and werewolfism are prohibited. So, okay, there's no vampire comics, there's no zombies, and there's no werewolves. Profanity, obscenity, smut, vulgarity, blah, 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 yeah. Nudity in any form is prohibited. Females shall be drawn realistically without exaggeration of any physical qualities. But yet the superheroes can be exaggerated male physiques. Let's see if there's anything here that really, really affects the monster comics. Okay, so that pretty much wipes out the genre as we know it. And so from 1954 until 1971, you had like Tales of Suspense, Tales to Astonish, the monster comics that Marvel was putting out were much more tame. There was some supernatural aspects to it, but there weren't any vampires or werewolves or any of that kind of stuff. There were giant monsters, almost kaiju-like monsters, and those are fine. When Stan and Jack created the Fantastic Four, the Thing is technically a holdover from those earlier Atlas monster comics. The Hulk certainly was derived from Frankenstein and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Classic literature, if you will, but not dealing with obviously Frankenstein dealing with the dead body parts and creating life out of them. So they got around it that way. So what happened in 1971? Well, the Comics Code Authority loosened their restrictions. They lifted the ban on vampires, ghouls, and werewolves when handled in classic tradition. The tradition of Frankenstein and Dracula and Robert Louis Stevenson. Then it was okay. So 1971 is where it began. Now, in 1957, okay, all the Comics Code Authority was already in place, and it had banned all those things that we just talked about. But what also happened, or rather 1954, what happened in 1957 is Screen Gems released what was known as the Shock Package. And this was the release of the classic Universal monster films to television for the first time. And they were shown to a whole new generation. Movies from the 30s and 40s that were at the theaters were now available on television to a wider audience. And that's what began the monster craze of the 1960s. And that went into the 1970s and it lasted to technically around 1974, 1975 was when the monster boom kind of died out. And I got in at the tail end, like 1972 was when I got into monster magazines and the models and all that kind of stuff. So I got on the tail end, but I still made it in. And it's ignited my lifelong love for these type of things. Henceforth, our show. So the interest was there. Monster Mania was crazy. It's why we had shows like the Munsters and the Addams Family. And there were, Big Daddy Roth creating monster cars, and it was everywhere. And in comics, you were restricted by the Comics Code. Now, in magazines, black and white magazines, you could get away with it, which is where Jim Warren's publishing came in with Creepy and Eerie and Vampirella, and they got around it. Marvel got into it in 1971 with Savage Tales #1, and this is the beginning of the Marvel boom of monsters. Because what was in Savage Tales #1? Well, for one thing, there was Conan, who Sword and Sorcery was really just getting lighting on fire with Roy Thomas and Barry Smith's Conan the Barbarian comic. But this was more like the rated R version. You could do some nudity. Obviously, look at that cover. You got a beheaded barbarian there. But what made this issue special for monster fans was it was the introduction of Man-Thing, created by Gray Morrow and Roy Thomas, and I believe Jerry Conway might have had a hand in it too. Man-Thing was the swamp creature, was a swamp creature, and there he is, drawn by the great Gray Morrow in his first appearance. Now, the swamp creature didn't really fall under the restrictions that we talked about of the Comics Code. In the 1940s, there's a long history of swamp creatures in comics, going back to Hillman Publications, The Heap, which appeared in Chuck Dixon wrote a bunch of stories with The Heap in Airboy when they brought him back in the 1980s. But I think The Heap was the first swamp creature. Then came Man-Thing in 1971, and followed shortly thereafter by DC's Swamp Thing, which was created by Len Wein and Bernie Wrightson. But Man-Thing was first, he came out first. He came out in, let's see, where is, this is May of 1971, Savage Tales #1. So, we had the lifting of the Comics Code Authority, and it was February or January of 1971 is when that got lifted. January 28th of 1971. So this is May 1971. Okay, and publishing is traditionally, particularly back then, there was a 4-month window. So if you had a May cover date, you backtrack 4 months, and you're around February, right? So that's when that book was actually on the stands. Would have been February of 1971, if the publishing date was May. So February, March, April, May. No, actually, it would be January. It would be on sale in January. So they must have had an inkling that these reforms were coming down. And by October of 1971, so now October, September, August, July, May, right? Or June, rather, June. So around June of 1971. So now we're like 6 months out from the reforms. Morbius, the living vampire, is the first vampire creature. And even then, they kind of hedged their bets. He's not an undead thing. Yet he was scientifically created, from through some experiments he was doing, he turned into a living vampire. And that was first appearance of Morbius was Amazing Spider-Man 101 by Roy Thomas and Gil Kane. So the next one to come out, and this is truly, I guess, the first horror comic that was completely restricted from coming into being because of the Comics Code, and that was February 1972. We were introduced to Werewolf by Night, which was an excellent comic, especially in the beginning when the great Mike Ploog was drawing it. His first appearance was Marvel Spotlight #2. I believe it was written by Jerry Conway with a plot assist by Roy Thomas, and just the incredible artwork of Mike Ploog. So that's February of 1972. So we 2 months later came out The Tomb of Dracula, another straight up vampire, and this one's the real deal, not the living vampire, but the king of the vampires. I can't remember who drew the first issue. It was not Gene Colan, I don't think. If it was, geez, I should have researched that. Maybe you guys in the chat will do that while I'm talking. See who drew Tomb of Dracula #1. But it really came into its own when Gene and Tom Palmer hooked up together. And from that point on, this was probably the best horror comic that Marvel was producing long term. Werewolf by Night was my favorite during the Ploog era. But Tomb of Dracula was more consistently great. So that's April 1972. And then by August of of 1972 in Marvel Spotlight number 5. So it's 3 issues after The Werewolf by Night. They introduce the first supernatural superhero, and that was Johnny Blaze, the Ghost Rider. And that dealt with demons and Satan and, again, things that couldn't be told under the old Comics Code Authority. Ghost Rider had a long run. The name is a derivative of a Western hero that Marvel had produced, but they modernized him on and made him a motorcycle rider, which is really cool. And I swear that the image of this thing, and now I've never seen it written anywhere, but if you've ever seen the film Tales from the Crypt, which was also 1972, there's a sequence with a skull-headed motorcycle rider. And it was used in advertisements, and I read about it in the Monster Times back in the 70s. And I swear that was the definite visual inspiration for the Ghost Rider. Too much coincidence, you know. It's just like the Amazing Colossal Man. I know Jack Kirby saw that, because there's a sequence where the bomb goes off and the guy is irradiated, and it's right out of Hulk #1. Only it came out years before. So I swear to that one too, that that was an inspiration for that visual. But anyway, I digress slightly. But the Hulk is technically a monster. So after the Ghost Rider of August 1972, Marvel releases in January of 1973 Frankenstein's Monster #1. Another great series early on, because it had again the great Mike Ploog. John Buscema stepped in for a few issues that were really cool. In fact, when I created and was drawing Joe Frankenstein, I was thinking of that Buscema dynamics, you know, of how he made the monster look, which I thought was really cool. Now, he wasn't as freaky or scary looking as Mike Ploog stuff, but there's that great Buscema dynamics to it. So that was a great series too. Frankenstein's Monster, Werewolf by Night. Again, both of them by Mike Ploog. So that's January of 1973, and then the last of they had other attempts at horror and stuff, but this is that main line that goes up to 1973. And like I said, the horror stuff was starting to die out by the horror craze was dying out by 1975. So in August of 73, we have The Living Mummy from Supernatural Thrillers #5. So now Marvel has their Frankenstein, their Dracula, their Wolfman, and their Mummy. And then, of course, some of the supernatural stuff like Ghost Rider. So they've got all their bases covered between 1971 and 1973. They also published magazine versions of like Tomb of Dracula. They got into horror comedy with what was it? Famous Monsters? No, Famous Monsters of Filmland was Jim Warren. Monster Madness. They had a black and white magazine called Monster Madness, which was stills from monster movies, and then Stan would write pithy, funny comments. When I was a kid, I loved that. But yeah, I bought a couple of them off of eBay, and I'm reading them like, oh God, this isn't funny. It's not really that good. But I love the imagery. I love just looking at the old pictures of the monsters. So that's pretty much why the whys and hows of how Marvel got into the monster comic business. So let's say good morning to everybody. I hope you enjoyed this little detour into comics from movies, but that's what the show's all about. See, right up there, it says discussing, oh, wrong color, monsters, sci-fi, horror, and comics. Prater 7 is here, a pop culture avenger, monster fan, man of war, 665, Don Perkins, JP Roca, Dr. Mask is here, Fearless Freep is here, George Travlos, good morning, Christopher Juliano, DJ SG, ooh, that's a tough one. I'll just put it up there. Hail Comicsgate. Dr. Mass says, worth him, that bastard. Yeah, what an opportunist. Hyper Kaiju says, good morning. "1970s monster artists are still some of my favorite artists to this day. Bernie Wrightson, Richard Corbin, and Mike Ploog are three of my favorites." Yeah, William Kaluta too. He did some great stuff over at DC, like for House of Secrets covers and stuff like that. I'd like to get him on the Storytellers. Actually, I got to make a note to reach out to him. No Pumpkin is crashing. She's sound asleep up there, the little slug. Crease, 1984. What did they do comics about then? When? During the Comics Code? They just basically avoided, straight up horror comics, focused on westerns, war, romance. But all of those were also curtailed by some of those things that we looked at in the Comics Code Authority. Romance comics with no sexuality, no war comics with no gore, or overt violence. You know, Nori Nerd says, good morning, North Free. JJW says, happy Monster Monday. Dr. Mass says the original Hulk looked similar to Frankenstein. Oh, yeah, definitely. I love those first 6 issues of the Hulk, especially those number 2 when Ditko inked Kirby, and number 6 in which Ditko drew it and inked it himself. Those are really the Hulk looks real creepy in those. North Free is postulating, would X-Men be considered a horror comic of sorts? Mutants, freaks of nature, tortured by their own gifts. I suppose if you put it in those terms, yeah, but that's not the way they presented it. Kevin Thomas says, hail Graham, hail chat. Yes, whatever knows fear burns at the touch of the Man-Thing. I actually like the Man-Thing better than Swamp Thing. JP Roca, we cannot see the image. What image was that? What didn't I put up? Dave Alameda says, good morning, Don Perkage. Could you share the Man-Thing cover again? It didn't show up on the screen. Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Let's do that. There it is. Does that work? Look at that. Gray Morrow. So awesome. Was the giant-sized Man-Thing? I think it was completely innocuous that nobody was thinking of it in those type of terms. I can't imagine, Stan, Roy would do a double entendre like that on purpose. Kevin Thomas says, even though it was way before I was born, I love 70s monster books. Such dynamic art and creativity. Yeah, some good stuff. Comics Code has come back in the physical embodiment of SJWs. Yeah, but the only difference is they ban everything that they disagree with. Morbius was great. Great cover on Spidey 101. Oh, we are not seeing any of your images. How about now? You guys seeing the stuff now? Like this Gray Morrow cover that's up? Let me scroll down to the bottom because I'm way up at the top here. Let's see. Yes, we are now. Okay, good, good. I will, first I got to scroll back to where I was here in the chat. There we go. Okay, now, if none of those images were showing, let me... Was this one up? This is the cover to Savage Tales #1. Yeah, there weren't a lot of images. There were just these two, and the... How about these? Were these were these showing the Graham Ingalls stuff? No, I'll show them again. What the hell? It's so great. Look at that, the colors and the drawings for ghastly Graham Ingalls. Look at that rotting face. These were great horror comics. The recently murdered doctors rises. That's great. That was the other image I had. And then I was reading off of this. And then we had the Savage Tales stuff. So that should take care of all that. Let's get back to the chat. Graham, these books have exploded in value. Oh, is that right? That's too bad. I used to like to get them on the cheap. I've got all the Monster of Frankenstein and all the Plug Werewolf by Nights. Those were cheap for a long time. Pedro Ang is here. He says, good morning. Hail, Graham. Hi, Comicsgate. Waisun Johnny Sai. I hope I pronounced that right, Johnny. Cool Monday morning watch. Excellent. We know who the gamers are, who set their alarms to go off and work and earn. They're up early to watch this show on Monday morning. Some love here for Buscema. Kevin Thomas, the world needs more monster books. Thankfully, Graham and Aaron and others are delivering the goods. Yeah, there's plenty of superhero stuff out there. That's why I like doing my Compass Comic stuff, and dealing with horror, sci-fi, little Western, different things that I find interesting and, less competition. Hyper Kaiju got a lot of nice Living Mummy comics on eBay last year for pretty cheap. Coolio. Dave Alameda says, when did Son of Satan come out? Let's see. That's a good question. I forgot about the Son of Satan. January of 1974. Marvel Spotlight 13. So a little bit later, again at the very tail end of all that stuff. Great lecture. Thank you, Graham. Ah, you're very welcome. Monster Madness was an offshoot of the comical cards that came out in the 60s. Yeah. They were were they cards or were they stickers? Man of War is off to PT. Catch you all on the replay. Excellent. Well, I hope your PT goes well. North Free says he wore all of his monster comics and magazines out from reading them. They ain't worth squat, but the memories remain. Stat Zero says, good morning, monster fans. Good morning, Stat. John McCarthy reminds us that Gene Colan lasted a long time while on both Dracula Lives and Tomb of Dracula. That's right, Dracula Lives was the name of the black and white magazine. Stat Zero says he has to wonder why YouTube didn't send him his notification. Well, that's a good question. I hope you saw my post on Twitter, because I put it on Twitter and on my Facebook feed as well. The Facebook feed, probably nobody sees it, because there's an attachment to it. And as soon as there's a link, that's when their algorithms go, we can't have this. But Twitter is a little bit more less judicial. Kevin Thomas agrees that Kaluta would be great for the storytellers, and that Empirus Carmilla #6 from Warren Publishing has Corbin's last published cover art. I don't know if I'm in the minority here, but DC ate Marvel's lunch in terms of these types of books with things like Weird War Tales, House of Mystery, House of Secrets. Yeah. DC had a really great run of mystery and horror stuff in the 1970s as well. And the same rules would have applied to them. But they had some really, really great artists on their books for a long time. Whereas like Marvel started off good with good guys like Plug and Buscema and Colan. And then the books usually got handed down to because the sales didn't warrant it, and the budgets for those books were going to be less, so they had to pay artists less. They couldn't get the top tier guys. But DC had a lot of guys from the Philippines, Spain, guys that could work cheap, basically, I guess, but were incredible artists. So I love those DC books, and I think we'll do a show on that one as well. We'll talk about the DC versions of horror comics. Although Marvel did have some great magazine-sized horror. Yeah, they did. Past Master Dan likes the Gator better than the Man Thing. That's Man Thing versus Mel. Okay, we're coming up to the point where people were able to see the images. That's good. We've seen it enough. Yes, we do. Well, Stat Zero just got Haunt of Fear Volume 1 reprints the other day. Nice. And Ingalls drew the best corpses hands down. He was a huge influence on Bernie Wrightson, and you can see it in Bernie's early work. Did you ever see any of Graham Ingalls' paintings that he did many years later, like in the 70s and 80s? Absolutely incredible. They're his horror paintings of the witch and the narrators of those books. I can't remember their names. I get them confused with eerie and creepy, but they're just incredible. Thoughts on some of the old EC having too much text? I hear some complaints about that. Yeah, that is a problem for me. The other thing was, the way EC produced comics is that the lettering was done before the artwork. So the lettering was lettered down on the boards, and then the art and the panels were already set. So the artists had these panels that they had to fill the artwork with and work around the text. Fortunately, they had the greatest artists in the comic business at the time, and they could work under those restrictions. But yeah, there is. I think it does get in the way, and it kind of it ruins some of the creativity of layouts that could have been achieved had they lettered it afterwards and maybe not have been so wordy. North Free says, "How about 1950s golden age of horror comics review, Graham? EC and the like." Oh yeah, yeah. We'll touch on that for sure. I just grabbed 4 to 5 Vampirellas, Erie, etc. for $2 a pop. That's cool. That's a good deal. JP Roca did get his notifications. That's good. Well, speaking of notifications, you have to subscribe to the channel and you have to hit the notifications button. It looks like a bell on the YouTube page. So if you're watching on YouTube, or rather Facebook, please go over to my YouTube page. All you have to do is type in Graham Nolan. It'll come up, and subscribe to the page. Hit those like buttons and like the shows, and it helps monetize the the show and allow me to spend the time and bring content. So I'd appreciate if you guys could do that if you haven't done so already. Forbidden Love was like a gothic horror romance comic by DC. Yeah, they had those cool kind of painted covers too. Thank you. Frankie's a fan of Val Myrick, who was great on Monster of Frankenstein. I didn't like that period myself. I didn't like the stories or the artwork. So I had checked out by then. Past Master Dan loved Val Myrick's Howard the Duck. Oh yeah, that stuff's good. Empyrean Vol says, Empyrean Vol? He loved Marvel's take on horror personally. Sir Adjo, I just love how Nolan is a low-key genius, humble family man. I'm now going to go back. I'm now going to back his book. Looks great. Well, thank you, sir, for the compliments and for backing Alien Alamo, which is a great segue for me to say, if you haven't backed Alien Alamo and you enjoy sci-fi and monsters and all this kind of stuff, please do so. It's only going to be up a little while longer. We're getting ready to start printing and fulfilling soon. I promised a December fulfillment, And by hook or by crook, we're going to be printing and begin fulfillment in December. Laying the hammer down on people, and we'll begin in December as I promised everybody. So it looks great, and it connects with my monster universe, with the Chenoo and Joe Frankenstein, and all that stuff. So you want to get in on the beginning of this fun stuff as this universe starts to unfold. So it's up on Indiegogo. Go check it out, if you will, please, and back it. Back it like your life depends on it, because it just might. Christopher Palmer says, I never felt that there was too much EC text until I got older eyes. Well, at least the lettering is good size. Just picked up a weird title from Marvel I didn't know existed. Tower of Shadows. Kind of an anthology. Yeah, there's I think the very last story that Stan and Jack did together is in Tower of Shadows, where they make an appearance in it. I've seen the pencils for that. It's absolutely amazing. Has a really cool Marie Severin cover too. Rick Saylor reminds everybody to hit that like button. Yes, sir. I hope you do a show on the great black and white mag, Psycho, and other horror mood zines. Oh, yeah. Yeah, everything is on the table. Thank you, Frankie. Why didn't you like Monster Frankenstein? I did like Monster Frankenstein. I said that it was one of my favorites, the early ones that Mike Ploog was drawing, and then that dovetailed into John Buscema drawing a bunch of stuff too. That run I loved. And then when it switched over to, I believe Val Meyer took it over. I just wasn't a fan of his work on that particular series. And the writing changed. I think it started off with Jerry Conway, with some Roy Thomas too, and then the writer changed, and I didn't care for it. Torvaldison, good morning, CG lads. 7:35 here, a.m. in Wisconsin. Just filled out his deer tags for the season this morning. A 10-pointer, approximately 425 yards, with my 6.5 Creedmoor. Can't wait for Alien Ammo backed at launch day. Well, thank you, sir, and good hunting. Enjoy that venison. John Morgan Betneal says he'd like to hear me talk about the Archie Comics horror stuff like Madhouse, etc. et al. Okay, we will get to that. We have a plethora of things that we can discuss here. That's what I like about this show. Dennis Shoemake, good morning, Dennis. I love all these reprint tales of Marvel horror in the 70s, Dead of Night, Crypt of Shadows, etc. Yeah, those kind of books, those type of anthology books and stuff, I agree with the Statistical Zero that DC ate their lunch. You know, it was much better looking stuff. Empyrean Vol says Marvel horror was always pulpy. The monsters were almost superheroes, and the superheroes were kind of monsters. Hulk was a monster. Dracula had his own comic. It was part of that blur of the 70s. Sunshine State, Joe Frankenstein, Monster Island, The Chenoo. I haven't read a Compass comic that I have disliked yet. Backing Alien Mo is a sure bet. Thank you, brother. Much, much appreciated. Honestly, don't rush it. I've got a list from my wife, and they're all CG comics for this Christmas. Willing to wait for what I'm sure will be quality work. Love you, man. Well, thank you. Not rushing it, because my end is done as far as the artwork. So there's no rushing to get the artwork done. So uh, the rush comes from production, and that won't affect the quality. So it's just, lighting fires and getting things lined up, and dealing with supply chain issues. But you know what? If there's a problem with printing because of product issues, paper, whatever, um, um, I let all my backers know every Monday. There'll be an update coming today too. Um, so if there's a delay, there's a delay. There's nothing I can do about that because I've got the artwork and the story obviously is done. We're just waiting on a few other things to fall in the line. So if it can't ship in December, it's because of things that are beyond my control, and everybody understands that. We know what kind of a world we're living in right now, and we're dealing with it. But when you actually get the book and hold it in your hand, um, you will love it. That much I can guarantee. The Scarecrow feature in Dead of Night was really cool. I never read that series, Dennis, but I do remember the Gil Kane covers, and they were killer. In fact, Gil Kane is who I will be talking about on the Storytellers this Wednesday, and I'll have a special guest Howard Chaykin on, who worked for Gil as an assistant, to regale us with some really great Gil Kane stories and talk about what the man was like and his approach to working. So that'll be a fun show. Rob Brown, what did you think of the Living Mummy character? I didn't read the Living Mummy. I had moved on by then. Uh, it's just that book wasn't on my radar. Again, seemed a little from the covers and stuff, a little superhero-y. And by that point, I was heavy into the actual superheroes. Roy Thomas was really great at pulp. Like he had all the sensibilities of that bygone era and brought them into the 70s. Yeah, I mean, if it wasn't for Roy Thomas, I don't think anybody would remember Conan the Barbarian, to be honest with you. The host for Tower of Shadows looked like the creeper. Looks like the creeper from Scooby Doo. Aaron Sarge is here. Morning. Late to the party, but better late than never. That's okay. Well, North Free says December is going to be great. Lots of campaign fulfillments coming. Excellent. Would love to see you do a show on one of my favorite characters, DC's Phantom Stranger. Love the Phantom Stranger. Even my wife is a huge Phantom Stranger fan. I had bought like all the early Phantom Stranger from the 70s that Len Wein and Jim Aparo were working on for her. So that's actually her little collection. She loves those comics. Past Master Dan, can't wait for sane people to take over. What am I missing? Take over what? Must be in reference to something we talked about, which is eluding me at the moment. Hyper Kaiju, Graham, no one does a better job with the campaign updates than you do. Can't wait to get my hands on the book. Thank you, my friend. Dr. Mass says, we know you over-deliver. There are projects on Kickstarter and Indiegogo that never delivered and never will. And that's a shame. That's sad because anybody who makes promises like that to their fans and doesn't deliver, they should just be, tarred and feathered because they ruin it for everybody else. They make people gun shy about crowdfunding. And, I guess it's, you got to do your homework a little bit, which is unfortunate, but really you sort of have to do that when you're dealing with any kind of business. That is that, you know, check them out. Have they delivered before? What's their track record? Before you, sign on to pledge to them. But it really does a disservice to everybody that's working really hard to further the art form and to deliver products that are not being covered in what used to be the mainstream. But Compass Comics will deliver. We always do. I haven't missed a deadline in 38 years, and I'm not going to miss them now. Because I love this art. I love this art form. I love storytelling and comics. They're so American, and I want to share that passion. Instead of having people leaving comics and never returning, I want to try and capture them and make them so they don't leave, and give them really great entertainment. That'll be great. Love learning about the history of comics. I think referring to the Gil Kane episode coming up. The crowdfunding establishment needs a credit rating, so those who don't deliver are cut off until they fulfill or refund. That's not a bad idea. I know Indiegogo is instituting some new policies as well. And it's not just, in comics, crowdfunding in comics, it's crowdfunding in general. There's been people that have raised millions for investment in product and stuff like that never delivered. And so I think they're going to be cracking down on some of that stuff. Eclipso is Alex Toth in House of Shadows, I think. I think you're right. It's definitely Alex Toth. And I believe it is House of Shadows or House of Mystery. One of those two. JJW, I've backed a bunch of projects. Very happy with everything I've backed. Oh, good. Good. I'm glad to hear that. North Free says too many of these crowdfunded creators just enter into it with ignorance. As a result, they underestimate the time and the money it takes. Yeah, a lot of guys, well, almost everybody is coming out of working for the man, where they handle the publishing and all that kind of stuff. And they're not businessmen or ever have had to deal with distribution, supply chain things, publishing, printers, all that stuff, because that was all handled for them. If you ever had to do that, like I published Monster Island myself back in 1998 and dealt with that, and that was still during the old system of distribution. That was a huge wake-up call for me. It was really interesting because I learned so much about the business side of comics, and I made plenty of mistakes when I did that back then. But that's what it's all about. It's all about, you're going to make mistakes, but that's what you learn from. And so I took that into these various other crowdfunding projects that I'd been involved with, like Joe Frankenstein, which was a crowdfunding disaster for me and Chuck, to Monster Island, which was handled by Ominous Press, and that went much better. And I learned from their mistakes, so that when I reignited Compass Comics and ran the campaigns myself, I had a bunch of failures that I could build upon and analyze and look at, and what did I do wrong here, and then study campaigns that did very well and figure out, how to manipulate that to have better success. And so far, so good. The Chenoo was very successful, and Alien Alamo is really, really beyond all expectations. So I'm very happy about that. Dr. Mass brings up a good point. I don't want to see any gatekeeping. The market decides. If guys don't deliver, people won't support them. Yeah, that's true too. The Sin Killer says he didn't get the notification from YouTube, and I've been here for a while. How are you doing today? Hey, chat. Well, I'm glad you made it in. I'm sorry that you didn't get the. That's a YouTube thing. There's a few people have mentioned that today that they didn't get it, and some did. Why is that? Monster fan, yes, I'm really disappointed with a lot of CG lately. Endless waiting, no updates, endless excuses. I'm really cutting back on buying a pledge. Graham, Shane, and a few others will continue to get money. Well, I do appreciate your support, Monster fan, and I'm sorry that you're having to deal with problems with other creators, but each one of us is our own boss, we run our businesses separately and differently. So, um, you know, I guess the market will bear it out. You'll support those that deliver to you, and in the future, you'll be more leery about those who either give you no updates or endless excuses. JJW says Comicsgate YouTube is the best way to learn which creators to back. Guests on Nolan and EVS are the ones you should track. Then with track then without from there. I get the gist of it. And thank you. Oh wait, here we go. Is the way to learn which creators to track. Start with guests on Nolan, EVS, and then work outward from there. I got a Twitter list too. There we go. Little editorial change. Past Master Dan says CG Now is a good place for noobs to start. Thank you. Frankie says, I don't mind waiting for my comics. I enjoy CG for more than the comics. I want live streams, interviews, etc. That takes up time, just my opinion. No, you're absolutely right. It does take a lot of time. My evenings, I consider this a part of my broadcasting for CG and for my products. It's getting your face out there, getting your personality out there, and your ideas, and connecting with your base, with your fans and stuff, because that is the coolest aspect of this whole new paradigm. Is that um, there's no walls in between the creation of product and the fans that buy it. Now it's like this is one big living room that you're in here with the creators, and you can talk, you can express your opinions about things you want, things that you don't want. Um, and to me, that's the most exciting thing. But yes, it does take time. You are out there on shows for hours at a time and constantly posting on social media because you're trying to fight algorithms and you're trying to get the word out. And it does take a lot of time. It takes time away from the board. The way I do it is that I work regular day hours. I'll do my social media stuff during the mornings, with my coffee or whatever, and then I'm at the board doing the actual heavy lifting, the drawing, and writing and all that kind of stuff. And then in the evening, that's when I do the promotional stuff and the shows. But after working all day, some of these guys, they go all night long, and I'm like, oh my God, by 10 o'clock, I am wiped out, but I got to do it. I got to get out there. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. It does take time, but it also, it's about balance. It's about understanding your own abilities, how much work you can get done, what deadlines you set for yourself. Okay, I got to get 3 pages done this week. That will put me on schedule for this date. And that's the way I do things. Is I know how many pages I can on average do, given that I'm doing all this other stuff. So that has to be factored into it. And if you do that properly, then you can hit all your goals. Sinkill says, I don't care about who's CG or not. I love comics. Well, that's the best way to approach it. Support what you love. There's a lot of good stuff out there by people that aren't CG. There's a lot of bad stuff that's in CG. I mean, it's like anything else. There's good and the bad. And you find the stuff you like and you support it, and you don't support the stuff you don't like. Okay, gang. I think we've finally gotten through here. We've had a lot of comments. This is awesome. Really, really, really great show today. I'm glad everybody was here. So, upcoming this week, as I mentioned, Gil Kane is going to be the subject of The Storytellers with special guest Howard Chaykin on Wednesday. Tonight will be the Comics Gate Kings on Ethan's channel, which is our usual place on Mondays. So we got that on Monday. Wednesday is The Storytellers. Tuesday's steak and wine night here at the Nolan Ranch, where my wife and I just chill and have, NRGX or NRG Comics. Thank you so much for the $25 super chat. Time to light up a good cigar. That's very generous, my friend, and that's a good cigar. I thank you so much. Actually bought a couple this weekend. I was up at the lounge with a buddy of mine, and I got some Alec Bradley. There was like a gift pack that they had on sale there, so I bought a bunch of those. So I will definitely enjoy one and think of you, sir. So thank you. Sinkiller says, I'll see the replay. Take care and be safe, everyone. Cool. Yes. It's a good reminder. Have a great day and happy Hanukkah to all of my Jewish friends out there. I hope you have a wonderful holiday. God bless you guys. So anyway, I was in promotion mode. I was saying before we sign off here, Thursday, I believe Billy has the professionals. And so that lines up this week. So next Monster Monday, we will explore DC's version of Monster Comics post restriction lifting of the Comics Code Authority. And we'll talk about their approach to things and look at some of their artwork. So thanks again, gang. Thanks for joining us for Monster Monday. Monster Monday. And we'll see you again. We'll see you tonight on the Comics Gate Kings. You have a great one. Bye-bye, everybody.